The young Comanche warrior was already waist-deep in the churning, muddy grip of the Brazos River's quicksand. The more he struggled in desperation, the tighter the river pulled him down, relentless and unforgiving. His horse, panicked, had already fled to the bank, leaving him alone to face a slow and certain death. From across the river, hidden in a grove of cottonwoods, Abigail Hawthorne watched in silent horror. Every survival instinct, honed by 3 years of solitude in this harsh land, screamed at her, "Run! He is the enemy. His people have brought death and destruction. You owe him nothing." The voice of reason was cold and clear, but then she looked into the boy's eyes. She didn't see a warrior, but a terrified child about to be swallowed by the world. And in one defiant moment, compassion won out over caution. Before she could think, she was moving. Tearing her apron, she braided it into a long branch, fashioning a flimsy lifeline. "Stop moving," she yelled, her voice carrying over the water. "You're only making it worse." After a tense and exhausting struggle, she managed to throw him the line, and with a risky feat of ingenuity, coaxed his own panicked horse into providing the strength to pull him from the mortal trap. They both collapsed on the riverbank, gasping for breath. As Abigail looked at the young man she had just saved, an enemy by every definition her world provided, she couldn't help but think of the life that had led her to this moment. 3 years ago, this same unforgiving land had claimed her husband and 2 infant children in one brutal winter. Most women would have fled a place so haunted by ghosts, but Abigail possessed a will of iron. She had stayed alone, 7 miles from the nearest fortified settlement, a solitary existence built on a foundation of loss that life had taught her to be hard in order to survive, but it had not, apparently, extinguished the flame of the woman she once was. The young man rose, still trembling. He touched his chest and spoke a single word. "Takakota." "Abigail," she replied. For a few minutes they simply stood there, 2 souls from opposing worlds, bound by an unimaginable act. Before leaving, Takakota took a small object from his pouch and tossed it to her. It was a beautifully carved piece of turquoise, shaped like a bear, strung on a leather cord. It was clearly a precious personal item of deep significance. He pointed to the gift, to his chest, and then to her. "A life for a life." With a final nod, he turned his horse and vanished into the brush, leaving Abigail alone with the silence of the river. She placed the necklace around her neck, feeling its warmth against her skin, unaware that she wasn't just holding a gift, she was holding a summons. And in 3 days' time, an entire warrior nation would arrive at her door to answer it. The next 3 days passed in an unnatural quiet. It was not the peace Abigail was accustomed to. It was a held breath, the land itself seeming to wait for something inevitable. Her chickens didn't wander, but huddled together in their coop. Her normally placid milk cow was skittish, her ears constantly twitching towards the river. Abigail felt a disquiet settle deep in her bones, her hand often unconsciously touching the turquoise bear, its smooth surface a tangible link to the event that had fractured her quiet life. And then, on the morning of the 3rd day, the silence broke. At first, it was just a whisper, a distant rhythm you could mistake for your own heartbeat. But it grew, steady and powerful, into a drumming that was not man-made. It was the sound of hoofbeats. Not one, or even a few, but the thunderous drumming of many horses moving as one, shaking the very earth. Abigail scrambled inside, her heart hammering. She grabbed her rifle from the mantel, her hands trembling as she loaded it. Through the small window, she saw a cloud of dust rising from the riverbank, the unmistakable sign of a large, fast-moving force. She braced the rifle on the windowsill, held her breath, and waited. When they crested the hill, the sight nearly stopped her heart. More than 50 warriors, a living river of painted horses and feathered lances, flowed into the valley. They moved as a single disciplined organism, each rider in perfect harmony with his mount. Their weapons glinting in the morning sun, at their head rode a man who commanded absolute authority. He was older than the rest, with threads of silver in his long black hair, and a face etched with the wisdom of countless seasons. But what stunned Abigail most was the undeniable resemblance, the same strong jaw, the same intelligent dark eyes, the same proud bearing she had seen in the young man she had rescued. This had to be Takakota's father. The war party halted about 50 yards from her cabin. The sudden silence after the thunder of hooves was even more terrifying. 60 pairs of eyes fixed on her small home, watching, assessing. The leader, who Abigail was certain must be a chief, urged his horse a few paces forward. He spoke, his voice carrying, clear and resonant in the Comanche tongue. It was not a war cry, but a formal declaration. From within the ranks, a younger, more familiar voice answered. Abigail recognized the voice of Takakota, though she couldn't see him. The exchange continued for a few moments. Then the chief raised a hand for silence. Then, in a move that surprised Abigail, he slowly dismounted. He carried no weapon in his hand. With measured, deliberate steps, he began walking towards her cabin. Behind him, Takakota also dismounted and followed, confirming Abigail's suspicion. The two men stopped about 20 feet from her door. Takakota stepped forward, speaking in halting but clear English. "My father, Chief Iron Bear of the Panatika Comanche, has come to speak with the white woman who saved his son from the hungry earth." The name Iron Bear sent a chill down Abigail's spine. He was a legend, a name whispered in terror across the frontier, and Takakota was his son, his heir. I am honored," Abigail replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I only did what anyone would have done." Takakota translated. Chief Iron Bear listened, his deep-set eyes never leaving Abigail, as if searching her very soul. Then he spoke, and Takakota translated. "My father asks why," the young man said. "Why did you risk your life to save an enemy?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. This wasn't just a visit of thanks. It was a test. Abigail took a breath. "Because I did not see an enemy," she answered, simply and honestly. "I saw a human being in danger. This land has already taken too much from me. I could not stand by and watch it take another." When these words were translated, a subtle shift occurred in Chief Iron Bear's stoic expression. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned and spoke loudly to his warriors. His voice rang with official proclamation. Takakota turned back to Abigail, his eyes filled with awe. "My father declares before all his warriors that you, Abigail Hawthorne, are a person of honor. He gives you a new name, She Who Saves Thee. Drowning, he says that from this day forward, you and your land are under the protection of the Panatika Comanche. No raid will touch you, no warrior will harm you. You have sanctuary." Behind them, the warriors let out a great cry, a sound, both wild and ceremonial, that echoed across the hills. Chief Iron Bear stepped closer. "But," he said, this time in his own English, slow and steady, "you have a choice. You can stay here and live as you have, but in safety, an island of peace in a time of war. Or you can come with us to our village and live among my people." He paused, letting the weight of his offer settle. "You saved the life of my heir. You have a place among us, if you choose it. Tomorrow, at sunrise, I will return for your answer." That night, the Texas sky brought no rest, only contemplation. As the warriors of Iron Bear kept a respectful vigil, Abigail sat on her porch, her mind a battleground of possibilities. She was not alone. Takakota, at his father's command, had stayed. He did not sit as a guard, but as a guide. Under the blanket of stars, he shared stories of his people, not tales of war, but of family, of intricate laws, of a deep connection to a land his people saw as a mother, not a property, to Beyond that, he spoke honestly of the difficult path ahead. If you come to live with us, he said, his voice low, you will have to prove yourself every day. There will be those who look at you with suspicion. He paused, gazing toward the distant settlement. But if you stay here, you will be alone. Between two worlds, your own people will not understand. They will call you a traitor. It is a path of thorns and solitude. When the first light of dawn painted the eastern horizon, Abigail had her answer. Her choice was not forged from fear, but from a newfound sense of purpose. Chief Iron Bear returned, but this time, not just with young warriors. With him was a council of elders, men whose faces were maps of age and wisdom, their bearings suggesting they were the keepers of the tribe's history. They came not to intimidate, but to bear witness. This was a formal council. Abigail stood tall on her porch, no longer just a lonely widow, but a woman who had found her footing. "Great Chief," she began, her voice carrying in the still morning. "Heir, I am deeply honored by your offer. But after a long night of thought, I believe I can serve both our peoples better by remaining here, in this place between your world and mine." A low murmur passed through the elders. Chief Iron Bear remained silent, his eyes bidding her to continue. "If I come to your village," Abigail explained, "I become a part of your world, but my voice is lost to my own. The settlers will see me as one who abandoned them. But if I stay here, under your protection, I can be a bridge, a place where trust can begin to grow. I can help both sides understand one another, to prevent the needless bloodshed." One of the elders, a man with a severe face, spoke in the Comanche tongue, his tone a clear challenge. Chief Iron Bear turned to Abigail. "Winter Moon asks a fair question," he said. "How do we know you will not side with your own kind when trouble comes? How can we trust you to speak for us with a true heart?" It was the question Abigail had expected. Instead of answering with words, she reached to her neck and took hold of the turquoise bear pendant Takakota had given her. She held it up for all to see. "This is not just a gift," she said solemnly. "It is a vow. When I accepted it, I accepted a responsibility. Your son's life now runs in my veins as surely as if we shared blood. I cannot break such a sacred trust and still live with myself. I will speak for your people as I would speak for my own family." Her words, and the symbolic act, seemed to move the council. Even Winter Moon gave a slow, deliberate nod. Chief Iron Bear looked at her with new respect. He turned and conferred with his elders. Their discussion was swift and complex, but in the end, a consensus was formed. "We accept your path," Chief Iron Bear announced, "but it comes with conditions. This land of yours will be considered neutral ground, a safe place for both sides. To meet, we will send teachers to instruct you in our language and customs, and in return, you will help us understand the ways of the white man." He looked her directly in the eye. "You will be our messenger, our negotiator. It is a role of great danger." "I understand," Abigail replied, her heart pounding with the weight of the responsibility. "I accept." Just as the agreement was sealed, with a solemn nod and a sense of relief began to settle, Chief Iron Bear spoke again, his words shattering any sense of peace. "Then your role begins now," he said, his voice turning serious. "Your first test will not come in weeks or months. It will come immediately. 3 days' ride to the east, there's a settlement called Harmony Falls. They have built their town in a valley that is our sacred wintering ground, violating the treaties. My young warriors grow impatient. Blood is on the wind." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Go to this place, she who saves the drowning. Speak to these settlers, learn their reasons. See if there is a path to peace, or if we must prepare for war. The fate of that valley is now in your hands." The journey east was a lesson in the land Abigail was trying to mend. She rode Wind Dancer, the mare Chief Iron Bear had given her, an animal so intelligent and swift it seemed to understand the gravity of her mission. Takakota rode beside her, no longer the frightened boy from the river, but a quiet guardian and guide. At a distance, hidden among the hills, 2 other warriors followed, silent shadows ensuring the safety of their unlikely emissary. The land they crossed was both beautiful and wounded. Fields of brilliant wildflowers stretched to the horizon, but that beauty was scarred by the black charred ruins of a homestead, by a handful of nameless graves marked with crude crosses. Each one was a reminder that peace here was merely the quiet pause between conflicts. They believe they have a legal deed, Takakota explained as they rested their horses, his gaze distant. A paper from your government that says the valley is theirs. But our treaty with your government came before their paper. Both sides believe the law is with them. It is a tragedy of 2 truths. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they saw it. A column of black smoke climbing into the clear blue sky. Abigail's heart pounded. Were they too late? Had violence already erupted? They urged their horses on, a sense of urgency closing in around them. But as they drew closer, they saw something strange. The fire was not from a raid. It was coming from the center of the settlement, and the people were not fleeing in panic, but fighting desperately together to contain it. A bucket brigade stretched from a well, their shouts a chorus of determination, not defeat. Remember our purpose, Takakota gently warned as Abigail prepared to rush in. You are a traveler seeking supplies. Let them see your kindness before they hear your words. They entered Harmony Falls, a small town built with an air of permanence. No one paid them much mind. All eyes were on the fire that threatened to consume the general store and leap to adjacent buildings. Without a second thought, Abigail dismounted and joined the bucket line. She worked alongside the very people she had been sent to negotiate with, sweat and ash forging an instant bond that transcended words. When the fire was finally contained, leaving behind devastation and exhaustion, the town's leader, a tall, bearded man named Jeremiah Blackwood, approached Abigail. "Ma'am, I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke and fatigue. "We don't often see strangers willing to risk themselves for us." His eyes flickered to Takakota with undisguised wariness. "We were just lucky to be passing through," Abigail replied, maintaining her cover. "This is my guide. He knows this country better than anyone." That night, they were invited to stay. As darkness fell, the settlers gathered around campfires, sharing what little food they had left. Abigail listened. She heard stories of broken dreams in the east, of debts, of the last hope they had poured into this valley. These were not greedy men. They were desperate families, but she also heard other words. A group of younger men, led by Jeremiah's son Marcus, spoke of teaching the savages a lesson. Their voices were laced with fear and hatred. "Peace doesn't work with them," Marcus declared. "Only force." Abigail realized the true conflict was not just between settlers and Comanche, but within the heart of this community itself. Late that night, Abigail found Jeremiah sitting alone, staring at his partially burned land deeds. This was her chance. "Mr. Blackwood," she began softly, "I've lived on this frontier long enough to know most conflicts are born from misunderstanding. Have you ever tried to speak with them, with the Comanche?" Jeremiah shook his head, a bitter smile on his face. "Ma'am, you can't negotiate with people who don't respect the law. We have the title. But what if they have a title too?" Abigail pressed gently. "What if there are treaties your own government signed, guaranteeing them rights to this valley? Is a devastating war worth the risk when another solution might exist?" Jeremiah looked at her sharply, suspicion creeping into his tired eyes. "How would you know such things about their treaties? Who are you?" This was the moment. The moment it would all work or all fall apart. Abigail took a deep breath. "I know," she said, her voice low and steady, "because I have spoken with them. I know, because their leader, Chief Iron Bear, is willing to discuss a peace that allows both peoples to exist." A deafening silence fell. Jeremiah Blackwood stared at her, his face a mask of shock, fear, and utter disbelief. His hand unconsciously drifted towards the pistol at his belt. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, each word like a stone, "that you are an emissary for them?" Jeremiah Blackwood stood frozen, trying to process Abigail's unbelievable words. An emissary? A negotiated peace? The idea was as outlandish as it was a glimmer of hope. But he was given no time to consider it. From the shadows between the buildings, figures emerged, and that fragile hope was extinguished. "I've heard enough," a voice dripped with venom. It was Marcus, his son, followed by a group of young men, their faces masks of fear and rage, rifles held tightly. "We've listened to her." "Lies. A spy, just like I thought. Marcus, stand down." Jeremiah ordered, but it was too late. Authority had slipped from his grasp. "You're too soft, father," Marcus sneered. "She's lulled you with stories of peace while her people wait to attack. But they won't catch us off guard." Before Abigail could react, the cold steel of a rifle barrel pressed into her back. Two of Marcus's group seized Takakota, who offered no futile resistance. The young man understood, as did Abigail, that any struggle now would be an immediate death sentence. His eyes burned with a cold contempt for this treachery. "What are you doing?" Abigail said desperately, as they bound her hands. "This is a terrible misunderstanding." "Oh, there's no misunderstanding," Marcus chuckled, a humorless sound. "You and your savage will make the perfect bait. When Chief Iron Bear comes looking for his precious son and his little spy, we'll be ready for them." The vile plan made Abigail's blood run cold. They weren't just going to kill her. They were intentionally trying to provoke a massacre. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "He'll bring hundreds of warriors. You'll destroy everyone here." "Good," Marcus snarled. "It's time we finish this." Just then, a sound made them all pause. A lone, mournful cry from a horn echoed from the hills. Takakota lifted his head. Abigail knew instantly what it meant. Their escorts had seen everything. The warning had been sent. Soon the earth began to tremble again, but there was no slowness to it this time. The sound was of an approaching fury, an army galloping with the sole purpose of vengeance. "To your positions," Marcus yelled, his earlier confidence now laced with a threat of panic. "They're coming." What followed was a nightmare. Abigail and Takakota were dragged to the center of the town square, used as human shields. Around them, the settlers scrambled to makeshift defensive positions in a panic. It was the chaos of farmers, not the discipline of soldiers. And then, the war party arrived. This time, they were not a diplomatic delegation. Hundreds of warriors, their bodies and horses painted with terrifying symbols of war, poured out from all directions, surrounding Harmony Falls like a closing fist. They didn't charge blindly. They moved with a lethal precision, taking up strategic positions, turning the town into a death trap for those inside dot in the midst of this whirlwind of fury. Chief Iron Bear rode his black stallion forward. He stopped just out of rifle range. His face was no longer that of a wise leader, but a granite mask of controlled rage. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of thunder, and it was in English so that all would understand. "Their judgment." "You have taken my son," he said, his voice as cold as ice. "You have dishonored the woman who carries my honor. I did not come here to talk. I came to take back what is mine." He looked around the trembling settlement. "Release them now. Surrender the men who did this. And perhaps the rest of you will be allowed to see the sunset." He raised a single spear. "You have until the shadow of this spear is gone. Then I will burn this place to the ground." The sun, indifferent and relentless, continued its journey across the sky, a silent judge counting down the final minutes to a verdict that would be written in blood. Bound and helpless, Abigail looked into the faces of her captors and saw that their fear had now curdled into fanaticism. Her hope for peace had vanished, incinerated in the fires of hatred. The shadow of the spear Chief Iron Bear had planted in the earth was shrinking, inch by inch, devouring the last hopes of Harmony Falls. The silence was taut, broken only by the whimpering of a child somewhere and the whispered prayers. Marcus. Blackwood stood, pale but defiant, holding his two hostages like a useless talisman. Annihilation felt inevitable. And then, a shift. It didn't start with a gunshot, but with a voice. Marcus. Put down the rifle. It was Emma Blackwood, his mother. She stepped out from one of the buildings, no longer a frightened woman, but the embodiment of a mother's righteous fury. She was followed by Mary Porter and the other women. They carried no weapons, but they wielded a power far more formidable. Mother. Get back, Marcus stammered. This isn't your concern. Not my concern? Emma shot back, her voice sharp as a razor. I crossed half a continent, buried a child on the trail, to build a home here. I worked beside that woman yesterday to save that very home from fire. And this is how you repay it? By making us all targets in a war you started? You are not protecting this community, you are condemning it. One by one, the other women of Harmony Falls stepped forward, forming a silent but impassable wall of their own. They stood between the armed men and the hostages. Jeremiah Blackwood saw this and finally found his voice. Moving to stand beside his wife. In the chaos, Emma pulled a kitchen knife from her apron. She didn't hesitate. She walked directly to Abigail and sliced through the ropes that bound her. Go, she whispered urgently. If there is a chance for peace, you have to take it now. Free, Abigail knew she only had moments. She and Takakota exchanged a single knowing glance. Together, they began to walk. They walked out of the circle of feuding settlers and into the deadly open space that separated the two worlds. Every step was an act of faith. Abigail could feel hundreds of eyes on her, the angry eyes of the Comanche, the frightened eyes of the whites. She carried no white flag, only her resolve and a silent prayer. When they stood before Chief Iron Bear, Takakota spoke immediately in Comanche, rapidly explaining the women's intervention. The chief listened, his face still a frozen mask of rage. He looked at Abigail. They have freed you, he stated, his voice devoid of warmth. But the insult remains. The treachery cannot be erased. Great Chief, Abigail said, her voice clear and strong. What you say is just, but I ask you to consider this. If you punish this valley, you will also destroy the women who defied their own men to do what was right. You will destroy the very seeds of honor and courage we are trying to find. I ask you not to extinguish that small flame, just to punish the darkness around it. She looked him directly in the eye. Give me a chance to show them their courage was not in vain. Show them that your own courage is greater than your anger. Chief Iron Bear stared at her, an internal war playing out in his deep-set eyes. He glanced toward the town, where he could see the women still standing, a silent, defiant tableau. Then he made a decision that would be retold for generations. Very well, he declared, astonishing even his own warriors. I will give them one last chance to show their honor. But I will not send a message. I will deliver it myself. Leaving the bulk of his war party behind, Chief Iron Bear, with Takakota and a small honor guard, and with Abigail at his side, began to walk into Harmony Falls. They came not as conquerors, but as a delegation, the sight of the most feared Comanche chief in Texas. Walking calmly into the heart of their town stunned the settlers into silence. Jeremiah Blackwood stepped forward to meet them, his face a mixture of respect and profound relief. There in the town square, which moments before had been a potential killing field, the most extraordinary negotiation in the history of the frontier, took place. With Abigail as the bridge, translating not just words but intent, the two leaders spoke. They spoke not of surrender, but of survival. Not of victory, but of cooperation. An agreement was forged. An agreement to share the valley. An agreement of respected boundaries. An agreement of trade. As the final terms were settled, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The crisis was over. A silence fell once more, but this time it was the silence of awe and of a fragile, new beginning. The name Harmony Falls for the first time was starting to be earned. As night fell on the Harmony Falls Valley, it brought not terror, but a quiet miracle. Chief Iron Bear's war party did not immediately depart. Instead, they made camp in the hills, no longer as besiegers, but as watchful neighbors. In the valley below, a slow but steady change was taking place. Campfires were lit, and this time they were fires of warmth. Not alarmed. The first steps of peace are always the most tentative. A settler shyly brought a pail of water for the Comanche horses. A Comanche woman, through gestures, expressed admiration for a settler's intricate quilt. But the most powerful image, the one that would be remembered longest, was that of the children. At first, they watched each other from a distance, curious and wary. But soon, the universal language of childhood took over, and a simple game of chase began, their laughter echoing in the night air, a sound purer than any treaty. Before Chief Iron Bear left with his warriors, there was one last piece of business. Marcus Blackwood, his face a study in shame, approached the chief. The young man whose arrogance had nearly destroyed them all stood now with his shoulders slumped. "Chief," he said, his voice breaking, "I was wrong. My fear made me a coward and a fool. I have dishonored myself and my community. I ask for your forgiveness." Chief Iron Bear regarded the young man for a long moment, not with anger, but with a deep, weary wisdom. "Honor," he said slowly, "is not found in never falling. It is found in rising after you have stumbled. Today you have begun to rise. See to it that you continue to walk that path." Later that night, as a cautious peace settled over the valley, Abigail sat on the porch of the church where she had stayed. Takakota came and sat with her, the two of them watching the twinkling campfires below in shared silence. "My father asked," Takakota said finally. "He wishes to know if you will stay in Harmony Falls to help see that this peace holds." Abigail looked out at the valley where the impossible had happened. "For a while," she answered. "But my real work is just beginning." She looked down at her hands, where the silver armband gleamed in the moonlight. Harmony Falls wasn't the destination. It was the proof. Proof that the bridge can be built, that it can bear weight. She turned to the young man she had saved. "There are other valleys, Takakota. There are other conflicts simmering. My work is to take this proof to them." When Takakota left to rejoin his people, Abigail remained alone in the quiet. She was no longer the lonely widow, trembling in her cabin. This land had taken a family from her, but in its place, it had given her a calling. She touched the turquoise bear pendant at her chest. It was no longer just a gift or a promise. It was a reminder of who she had become, a bridge builder, a bearer of hope. The road ahead would be long and dangerous. There would be those who called her a traitor and others who saw her as a saint. But tonight, under the vast Texas sky, Abigail Hawthorne knew she had finally found her place. Not in one world or the other, but in the fragile space in between, the space that is built, not of land or treaties, but one moment of trust, one act of courage, one bridge at a time.